Welcome to our deep dive on renewable energy.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a mountain of government documents and lesson plans.
Wow.
And I'm not going to lie, it's a bit intimidating, but we love a good challenge.
Always up for it.
We're here to extract those golden nuggets
Right.
of knowledge about renewable energy and, more importantly,
Yeah.
answer some frequently asked questions that pop up around this topic.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that while there's a lot of enthusiasm for renewable energy, there's also a lot of confusion
Yeah.
and even misinformation circulating.
Exactly. So we're going to tackle those head on,
Love it.
using these sources to address those common questions
Right.
and hopefully clear up some misconceptions along the way.
Sounds good to me. A lot of folks are curious about
Yeah.
the reliability of renewable energy sources.
Oh, sure.
It's a valid question, especially when we think about our dependence on a steady flow of energy.
Right. We hear things like, what happens when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow? So let's unpack that. What do our sources say about this intermittency issue?
Yeah, these sources emphasize that while intermittency is a challenge with certain renewable sources like solar and wind, it's not an insurmountable one.
Okay.
There are actually multiple strategies being developed and implemented to address this.
Okay, so give us some specifics. What are some of these strategies?
One of the most promising solutions highlighted is energy storage.
Okay.
Think batteries on a much larger scale.
Interesting.
As battery technology advances, we're getting better at storing excess energy generated during peak times and releasing it when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing.
So it's like having a giant backup power supply for renewable energy.
Exactly. The documents also talk about grid diversification as another key strategy.
Okay.
This basically means combining different renewable energy sources to create a more balanced and reliable energy system.
Yeah.
For example, by integrating solar and wind power, we can offset the intermittency of each source.
It's like diversifying your investment portfolio, but for energy.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Now, I know another big question people have is about the cost of renewable energy. I mean, we hear all the time about how expensive it is to go green. What do our sources have to say about that?
It's fascinating how quickly the narrative around renewable energy costs is changing.
Yeah.
The sources actually point out that the cost of renewable energy technologies has been dropping dramatically in recent years,
Indeed.
especially for solar and wind power.
So is it actually becoming cheaper to go green?
In many cases, yes. Renewable energy is becoming increasingly cost competitive with fossil fuels.
Wow.
And when you factor in the long-term savings on energy bills, not to mention the reduced healthcare costs associated with cleaner air, the economic argument for renewable energy starts to look pretty compelling.
That's a great point. And I bet some people are also wondering about the environmental impact of producing renewable energy technologies. Like, how green is it really to manufacture solar panels or wind turbines? What kind of trade-offs are we talking about here?
These sources acknowledge that no energy source is completely without environmental impact. Right. And this is important. They emphasize that compared to fossil fuels, renewable energy sources have a significantly smaller footprint over their entire life cycle.
Can you give us some concrete examples?
Sure, take solar panels, for instance.
Okay.
While manufacturing them does require energy and resources, the overall emissions throughout their lifespan from production to disposal are far lower than those associated with extracting, processing, and burning fossil fuels.
So it's not a perfect solution, but it's a substantial improvement over our current reliance on fossil fuels.
Exactly. And it's worth mentioning that research is constantly ongoing to make renewable energy technologies even more sustainable.
I see.
They talk about using recycled materials in manufacturing and developing more efficient processes to further reduce the environmental impact.
Now, this all sounds great, but I think a lot of people feel like the shift to renewable energy is something that's out of their hands. Like it's up to governments and big corporations to make it happen. Is it the message our sources are sending, or can individuals actually make a difference here?
These sources actually make it clear that individuals absolutely have a role to play.
Oh.
In fact, consumer demand is a major driver of the transition to renewable energy.
So what can we do aside from buying an electric car and putting solar panels on our roofs, which, let's be real, isn't feasible for everyone?
There's actually a lot you can do. The first step is simply reducing your energy consumption at home.
Okay.
We're talking practical things like using energy-efficient appliances, switching to LED light bulbs, and even just being more mindful of how much energy you're using.
Those are all great tips, and I've been hearing about community solar projects. Can you tell us about those?
Absolutely. Community solar is a fantastic option for people who can't install solar panels on their own homes, like renters or folks living in apartments. It allows you to subscribe to a shared solar farm and receive credits on your electricity bill.
So you're still supporting solar energy, even if you don't have the roof space for panels. That's pretty cool. What else can folks do to support the transition to renewables?
Another impactful action is choosing electricity providers that offer renewable energy options.
Okay.
Many utilities now have green pricing programs that allow you to support renewable energy development through your electricity bill.
So we can literally vote with our wallets by supporting companies that prioritize renewable energy.
Exactly. And of course, you can always advocate for policies that support renewable energy at the local, state, and national levels.
Okay.
Contact your representatives, attend town hall meetings, and make your voice heard.
I love that it's so empowering to know that we're not powerless in this transition to a cleaner energy future.
It's all about collective action, and every individual contribution makes a difference.
Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground already addressing some of the most common questions and concerns people have about renewable energy.
It's amazing how much information is packed into these sources.
It really is. But before we move on to exploring some specific examples of renewable energy technologies, I'm curious.
I think it'd be helpful to dive into some specific types of renewable energy, especially since these sources offer some really interesting insights beyond the basics.
I'm totally on board with that. I'm actually really curious about geothermal energy.
Okay.
I always picture those dramatic geysers shooting hot water into the air.
Right.
But how exactly do we harness that energy, and is it really a practical solution in places that aren't, volcanically active?
That's a great question, and the lesson plans actually provide a really clear explanation of how geothermal energy works.
Okay.
Essentially, it involves tapping into the Earth's internal heat, which is constantly being generated by radioactive decay in the planet's core.
Okay, so it's not just about those dramatic geysers and hot springs we see in nature documentaries.
Right. In some cases, we can directly access hot water or steam near the Earth's surface,
Okay.
which can be used to generate electricity or heat buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But even in areas without easily accessible geothermal resources, there's something called a geothermal heat pump.
That sounds intriguing. How do those work?
They take advantage of the relatively stable temperature underground. Even in colder climates, the ground a few feet below the surface maintains a fairly consistent temperature year-round.
So it's like using the Earth as a giant heat sink or heat source, depending on the season.
Precisely. Geothermal heat pumps use a system of pipes buried underground to extract heat from the ground in the winter to warm your home.
Oh, wow.
And then transfer heat from your home back into the ground in the summer to cool it.
That's so clever. It's like using the Earth's natural temperature regulation to our advantage.
Exactly. And the sources highlight that geothermal heat pumps are incredibly energy efficient.
Nice.
Often using 25% to 50% less energy than conventional heating and cooling systems.
Wow, that's a significant difference. So geothermal energy is a viable option even in colder climates.
Absolutely. It might not be as visually dramatic as a geyser,
Right.
but it's a surprisingly effective and sustainable way to heat and cool buildings.
Okay, so geothermal has me rethinking my home heating and cooling situation.
Yeah.
But what about something like bioenergy?
Yeah.
I have to admit, my understanding of it is pretty limited.
We'll get ready to expand your knowledge because the sources provide some really interesting details about bioenergy.
I'm ready.
Essentially, it involves using organic matter, also known as biomass, as a fuel source.
So we're talking about burning things like wood or crops for energy. It seems a bit old-fashioned.
It might seem that way, but bioenergy has actually come a long way. For instance, some power plants are now replacing coal with biomass,
Okay.
such as wood pellets or agricultural residue.
So instead of burning coal, which we know is incredibly polluting, we can burn biomass. Is that really a cleaner option?
It can be. The sources explain that one sustainably sourced and managed biomass can be a carbon-neutral energy source.
Okay.
This means that the carbon dioxide released during burning is offset by the carbon dioxide absorbed by plants as they grow.
Okay, so it's all about the source of the biomass.
Exactly. And the documents delve into the concept of biofuels, which are liquid fuels derived from biomass. They highlight ethanol, which is typically made from corn or sugarcane, and biodiesel, which can be produced from vegetable oils or animal fats.
Right. I've seen pumps at gas stations offering ethanol blends.
Right.
But are these biofuels actually making a difference in terms of sustainability?
They have the potential to The sources acknowledge some debates around the sustainability of certain biofuels, particularly those derived from food crops.
Okay.
But they also highlight exciting advancements in producing biofuels from non-food sources like algae and agricultural waste.
The algae fuel, that sounds futuristic.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the sources mention that algae-based biofuels could potentially replace a significant portion of jet fuel,
Wow.
which would be a huge win for reducing emissions in the aviation industry.
Okay, so bioenergy is a lot more complex and nuanced than I initially thought. It's not just about burning wood in a fireplace.
Not at all. It's a rapidly evolving field with the potential to play a significant role in our transition to a more sustainable energy future.
Now, speaking of innovation and sustainability, I was really intrigued by the story of Barefoot College, which you mentioned earlier. It sounds like an incredible example of how renewable energy can empower communities in really meaningful ways.
Barefoot College is a truly inspiring organization. They focus on training women from rural communities in developing countries to become solar engineers, bringing electricity and other essential services to their villages.
Wow, so they're not just providing technology, they're actually empowering women with the skills to build and maintain their own renewable energy systems.
Exactly. The sources detail how these women, many of whom are grandmothers, traveled to Barefoot College in India for 6 months of hands-on training.
Wow.
They learn everything from installing solar panels to building solar water heaters and even setting up solar-powered water purification plants.
That's incredible. And what's even more amazing is that they return to their communities and share their knowledge, creating a ripple effect of empowerment and sustainability.
It's a beautiful example of how renewable energy can be a catalyst for social change, particularly for women who often face barriers to education and economic opportunities.
It's a reminder that sustainability is about so much more than just technology.
Right.
It's about empowering people and creating a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely. And Barefoot College showcases how renewable energy can be a powerful tool for achieving both environmental and social goals.
I love that. Okay, so we've explored some really fascinating aspects of renewable energy, from addressing common concerns to diving into specific technologies and even showcasing the inspiring work of organizations like Barefoot College. But I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this vast and ever-evolving field.
You're right. There's so much more to uncover, and I think these sources provide a great foundation for further exploration.
Agreed. And I'm wondering, as we wrap up this deep dive, what really stood out to you from these sources? What surprised you or challenged your assumptions about renewable energy?
You know what struck me most is the sheer breadth of innovation happening in the renewable energy sector.
Yeah.
It's not just about tweaking existing technologies.
Right.
It's about entirely new ways of thinking about energy production, storage, and distribution.
I agree. It feels like we're on the cusp of a major energy revolution. And it's incredibly exciting to see so many creative solutions emerging. And these sources, while providing a great overview,
Yeah.
also highlight that this is a constantly evolving field.
Absolutely. What might seem futuristic today could be commonplace tomorrow. So staying curious and informed is crucial.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to ponder.
Okay.
Given what you've learned about the benefits, the challenges, and the incredible potential of renewable energy, what role do you see it playing in your own life and community in the years to come? Perhaps as making more conscious choices about your energy consumption, exploring community solar options, or even advocating for policies that support a cleaner energy future.
It's a question worth reflecting on, especially as the transition to renewable energy continues to gain momentum.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into renewable energy. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring,